Hi, and welcome to Women in Retail Talks. I'm Ashley Chiradio, Senior Content Strategist at the Women in Retail Leadership Circle, and today I'm joined by Kate Klemmer Terry, who is currently the Chief Revenue Officer for Quiet Logistics, a third-party fulfillment company. Previously, Kate has held roles as the DVP of Internet at Coach, VP of E-commerce and Licensing at Kate Spade, and even launched Polo.com as the GMM of Ralph Lauren Media. So today we're going to be talking about the rise of e-commerce, how much it's changed, and where Kate sees it going in the future. So Kate, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I gave an introduction about you, but maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I grew up in kind of a large family. I'm the youngest of 7, and so that sort of breeds a distinct work ethic. And so me and my siblings, I think we started working, my sisters and I had a camp when I was in 7th grade. So I've sort of always worked. I would say out of the 7 of us, I'm the only one in the fashion industry, however, the only one who made it into that leap. But I always kind of fancied myself as wanting to be a designer, but I kind of had left brain, right brain thing going. So I ended up more on the merchandising side. And I went through, from merchandising to marketing to e-commerce. I worked in luxury. I worked in mass. I kind of joke that it was sort of like my liberal arts education in fashion, getting kind of that broad spectrum, which also helped me end up being a consultant for 8 years prior to joining Quiet. So it sort of gave me that well-rounded background, which I've thoroughly enjoyed.
Great. So I think it's so interesting that you launched Polo.com and you held these digital roles at a time when e-commerce was really beginning to pique people's interests, but still a lot of fashion companies held back and they were late to the web. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your experience and how it felt to work in e-commerce during this time.
So it really was it was an interesting time, given it was basically the beginning for a lot of fashion brands. It was 1999, and there were only a handful of brands that actually had websites at that point. So for us, it was really, none of us had ever launched a website. So it was really kind of the Wild West. We were able to launch the website without a lot of constraints, right? There weren't a lot of knowns around what was the right way to do something or not the right way. So we really were free to do kind of a full exploration of what we thought was the right way of presenting the product. I joke now, back with some of my peers from back then, that when I look at what kind of content we were able to generate and the way that we built the website, it was light years ahead of kind of even where a lot of websites are now. We went from that era was a lot more around the theatrics of it, and a lot more around really developing content. For every line we had at Polo, we had a distinct look and feel for the entire section around that line. And I think just the practicality of, how much it costs to produce all that content, kind of overcame the benefits of it, and the ROI wasn't there. And so most websites kind of for a long period went away from that content. I feel like the ones that figure it out how to do it, it is really an essential part. Like I think about Instagram as sort of just that, it's all the context and the content around the product that's really making such a difference. So it was really a fun time to be part of e-commerce, and that was the start of my my then part of the career that is really all e-commerce, going from Polo to then Kate Spade, Coach, and Tommy. And most of what I consulted on was e-commerce as well.
Yeah. It's so interesting you brought up the point about content, because I feel like that is huge right now.
Right. Yeah. It's giving it's giving product context, which, it's just that we used to kind of capitalize it as the differences in the way you're greeting different customers in your website or on your mobile or wherever they are, in your stores even. There's 3 different types of customers, and to us there was the customer who knew exactly what they wanted. I know I want a white shirt, and so you're going to make my site as easy as possible for me to navigate to the white shirt. The second person is the person who doesn't know you at all and needs to kind of understand who the brand is, and needs a little background on the about of that brand. And then the third one is the one that I don't feel like anybody maximizes for, is I already love your brand, but I don't know what I want to buy, and I need you to tell me what I should be buying. And that middle part is the part that I don't think a lot of websites do well. And And that is a huge portion of their customer base. I don't, and there were some sites like J.Crew for a long time did it very well. People who started in catalog kind of knew how to do that, how to storytell with the product in a relevant way. There's lots of companies who know how to do it in an irrelevant way, but it's more helpful to the end consumer when it's, speaking to them, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. So let's shift gears a little bit and tell me a little bit more about Quiet Logistics. It uses robots to ship orders to some of the world's leading fashion brands, and you just opened a West Coast fulfillment center too. Why is using a third party for fulfillment the right choice for retailers?
So, it depends what size the retailer is, why it's a good choice. I would say, and I'll tell about Quiet in a second, but so when you're first starting out, which is really the sweet spot for us, we have a lot of digitally native brands and a lot that came to us when they were a startup. And at that stage, it's really important that they remove the stress over this whole back of house kind of piece of the shipping, the storage, the packing it up, dealing with the shippers. That piece, typically from what we see, the people who launch these brands are not operations people by nature. They're normally coming from the other side. They're marketers or they're product people that have launched these brands. They very rarely have a founder who came from the operations side. So it's very helpful for them to remove all of the stress of that whole piece and have someone who knows how to do it just deal with it for them. I would say if you look at the other end of the spectrum at the larger customers, larger brands that are more established, they may have their own in-house fulfillment, but they look to the third parties to expand their reach. Getting closer to the end consumer, which saves them on costs and also, meets that brand promise of getting it to the end consumer faster and more cost effectively. So there's many reasons in between why people use a third party. I would say Quiet in particular came at this a little differently than most of the third party fulfillment providers, in that we started with the people who are direct to consumer, mostly digitally native brands. And that's an important distinction just because the entire warehouse is set up differently if you are shipping to direct to a consumer as opposed to a wholesale partner or a retail store. You're shipping eaches as opposed to shipping cartons of product. So our founders were warehouse management system guys, and so they thought, well, let's take this technology and this e-commerce thing is really booming. Let's figure out how to build a warehouse that's specifically catered to shipping eaches. I think what's also interesting about Quiet is it's a 10-year-old company, and we had Kiva Robots, which is the robot system that Amazon bought a number of years ago and then subsequently said that no one was allowed to use besides them. So then the founders of our company kind of felt like there wasn't the right robot system out in the market, and they invented their own, because of course that's what you do. You just make your own robots. So they invented a company called Locus Robotics, which is now spun off and is its own company, but those are the robots that we use. Essentially, the way we see the whole mapping of the warehouse is that we use human labor for where it's value added for it to be human labor, and then we use the robots for where it's not value added for a human to be doing that task. So in other words, instead of in some warehouses where there's still people walking with big carts of totes to try and fill all these orders, they're walking miles and miles around a warehouse. Instead, in our buildings, the robots do the walking, and in their algorithms that feed them, they are also economizing on that path. So they're making the most logical, efficient, fast path. And then the humans are standing in aisles and monitoring certain aisles. So they're still doing the picking, but they're not wandering, spending time wandering around the warehouse. So from that standpoint, it's very scalable and very efficient. And then we also use human labor for something that also sets us apart, which is the human touch of the more value-added services. This field calls it. If you think about a digitally native brand, their first interaction with a customer is often that package, and when it gets to their door and when they unveil it and they open it up, that interaction is the first sort of physical relationship they have with the customer, if you will. And so that package is so important. And if you've ever gotten a package from Mgemi or Bonobos or one of our brands, you see there's tissue and stickers and handwritten notes, all the stuff we did actually at polo.com in the very early days and quickly got eliminated for cost, unfortunately. But it's just that whole experience of unwrapping. So that kind of thing, we prefer to put humans in that role because that's value added for them to be tying a bow as opposed to wandering the warehouse. So that's sort of the balance between. Everybody likes to talk about, the robots taking over the humans' jobs, but in our world, we don't really feel like that's the case at all. And I think you mentioned our West Coast facility. So we were bought this year by Related, who did Hudson Yards, and also Greenfield Partners, who's a real estate investor, with the idea of expanding us around the nation so that we can be closer to the end consumer to fulfill that promise of 2-day, same day. Delivery in those top markets. So we are in Devens, Mass is where the company started, which is outside of Boston. And then we have a facility in St. Louis. We opened LA this summer. We are opening Chicago in the beginning of next year and Dallas in the middle of next year. And then New York will follow shortly after that. So we're definitely improving our footprint, kind of map to where our clients' end consumers are.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are very efficient and you figured out exactly how to use the robots in partner with humans.
Yeah, exactly. That's our goal.
Yeah. So what prompted you to switch gears from working directly for retailers to working for a third party, and how has your past experience helped you in this new role?
So I think what prompted me from a practical standpoint was I had been consulting for about 8 years, which was the perfect timing for me. I have 4 kids, and when I started my consulting, they were all under 8 years old. And so it was the perfect time for me to have the flexibility to work at 10 o'clock at night if I wanted to be at the school at 9 o'clock in the morning. But after the 8 years, and now they're all, fairly self-sufficient. I wanted to be back in a company where I owned the results. It's one thing to tell people how to do it and then watch them not do it. It's very frustrating. So I kind of needed to get back into somewhere where I felt like I could be really impactful and own it and drive it, and kind of missed that piece. I met Quiet along the way in my consulting, as I had introduced a few brands to them. And when they were purchased, they realized that they wanted, for this next phase, they wanted someone who understood brands to come on board. And so clearly with my liberal arts education and fashion and all the different brands that I've worked for, I have a fairly good understanding of what brands are looking for. And so the role that I'm in is a new role for Quiet. It's Chief Revenue Officer was not something that existed before. And I have marketing, sales, and business development reporting into me. Marketing and business development are 2 new groups. So my background of being a business driver for brands is super helpful on this side because I understand what they need from us. And so I'm able to cater our strategies to how we can help them grow their business, which ultimately grows our business. It's a slightly different perspective than an operations person comes at it from. And so we make a good balance in our team between the operations guys and me and the people on my team who come from brands. So it's a very healthy balance, I think, of how we push the company forward and our brands.
So I wanted to end with, e-commerce has already changed and grown so much, and it will continue to change. What do you think's next, and what are some e-commerce trends you're seeing right now?
So I would say, there's a lot of different trends, but the ones that I think will kind of will hold is the first one is one I mentioned before, which is this idea of getting the product to the customer's expectations ratcheting up on how fast and efficient they think that product should be able to get to them. A lot of that, of course, is driven by Amazon setting expectations, but the rest of us sort of have to follow. And I think as accessible as we can make product will help everybody's bottom line in the long run anyway. It also helps in a couple of other scenarios, which is if you think about the product being closer to the end consumer, it's also closer to the brand's stores. So for us, this is like has many tentacles in that, imagine if we have a facility in New York and the brand has 5 stores in New York, we can be their backstock. They don't actually have to have as big a footprint for their stores. So I think that piece too of figuring out the right math around omni-channel, because I think everybody likes to say, oh, physical retail is dead. Well, they also said the catalogs were dead, and now catalogs are back. So nothing ever is really dead, in my opinion. It's a matter of balancing what is the right way of assorting it almost, or balancing between these channels for your customer base. So I think that whole thing is a big piece of people are still unlocking this omni-channel piece. The other thing is that in that, the whole social phenomenon has turned selling into there's a whole new definition of selling. It's not anymore one to many. It's not one big store selling to many consumers. It's many to many now. And that just creates a whole new dynamic where I think there's a lot of things that will crop out of that in terms of new ways that we shop, new ways that brands interact with customers. There's interesting technology a few friends were telling me about recently around even this whole secondhand market and how brands are actually trying to be a part of that whole ecosystem, that whole life cycle of their product. The many to many is really, that will be a very fascinating piece for these brands to tap into, I think. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that was really great insight. Thanks, Kate.
It was great talking to you.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at wirlc.com/podcasts for show notes. Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.